Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our April 22nd, 2026 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. For those of you who are here with us in person, paper copies of the agenda are available on the table back by the door. Robin also made coffee for you all this evening if you need a caffeine boost. Reviewing our full agenda, first we will consider our consent agenda, and we have just 3 items on that this evening, after which we will have general public comment. This evening, we actually have a proclamation first, and then we will have general public comment. And we do apply certain rules to that, given our limited time and need to have an orderly and efficient meeting. We will do our best to enforce these rules consistently and without regard to the point of view expressed by the speaker. Each speaker will be limited to a total of 3 minutes of speaking time. However, we will accept public comment of any length in writing. Individual speakers may not donate unused time to other speakers. All comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission that are not on today's agenda. And we reserve the right to mute and remove any speaker whose comments are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent. Campaigning for public office during the public comment period is not allowed. Please give your full name and residence for our meeting minutes if comfortable doing so, and please address your comments to the Commission directly. We will hear from people in person first and then look to our Zoom meeting attendees. If you are online, please use the raise your hand function if you wish to provide your public comment virtually. Please also know that comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but we value the input. We don't usually respond to general public comment on the spot, but if you leave your contact information with county staff, we will try and get specific questions answered. After general public comment concludes, we will move on to our regular business agenda for tonight. There is just 1 item on our regular business agenda. And for each action item, we will hear from staff or an applicant, if applicable, first, and then that's followed by questions from the Commission. Then we will open the floor up for public comment that is relevant to that item. And once public comment is concluded, we bring that item back to the Commission for further discussion and a vote on any action. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. With that, Commissioners, we do have 1 proclamation to read this evening, which I would like to take the liberty of reading for National Crime Victims' Rights Week. It's my distinct pleasure to do so as a longtime crime victims advocate in our community. Whereas the criminal justice system plays a vital role in preventing crime, holding offenders accountable, and protecting the rights, dignity, and healing of victims. And whereas National Crime Victims' Rights Week provides an opportunity to honor victims and survivors of crime, recognize the progress of the victims' rights movement, and reaffirm our commitment to ensuring all victims are treated with fairness, respect, and compassion. And whereas the Douglas County District Attorney's Office collaborates with law enforcement, victim advocates, social service providers, and community partners to promote justice, provide trauma-informed support, and strengthen trust within our community. And whereas this year's National Crime Victims' Rights Week theme, Listen, Act, Advocate, Protect Victims, Serve Communities, calls on all of us to center the voices of victims, respond with meaningful action, and work collectively to create pathways to safety, healing, and justice. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Douglas County Commissioners hereby proclaim April 2026 as National Crime Victims' Rights Week in Douglas County. And we encourage all residents to recognize the importance of victims' rights, support those impacted by crime, and work together to build a safer, more just, and compassionate community for all. Adopted on this 22nd day of April 2026 by the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas. And with that, I believe we have some guests that are going to come share a little bit more from, looks like District Attorney Dakota Loomis is coming up. I'm also going to take personal liberty and shout out a few victim advocates in the room who do really important work and share that we're in a small community. I went to high school with one of them, I went to college with one of them, and I used to work with one of them. And I'm neighbors with one of the attorneys too. So there you have it.
There we go. Thank you for the cue too. Thank you, Commissioner Reed, for that introduction and for the acknowledgement of our staff. And I thank the Commission for acknowledging National Crime Victims' Rights Week, as well as I got a very large thank you for your continued support of the community organizations that day in, day out work to support victims and survivors of crime in our community. I know I came before this board as a board member for the Children's Advocacy Center of Douglas County and received additional funding from this board. I know there's a commitment, not just in word, but in action to the groups in this community who help. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank all my staff who work on this day in, day out. Lisa Moore, Chief of Staff, and then we have 4 victim rights specialists now in our office. Lashane, Cassie, Cicely, and Giselle. All 4 of them work to each day make sure folks can traverse the criminal legal system, oftentimes in the worst part of their lives in the system they've never dealt with before. So making sure that our office hears those victims, centers their journey through that system when we serve them, to make sure that their rights are upheld, that we are making sure that they are first and foremost when we're prosecuting these cases. It's a very large deal for our office. And I also really would like to thank the organizations that we work with on a day-to-day basis. Willow Domestic Violence Center, the CARE Center. We work with law enforcement agencies on a daily basis who I think do an incredible job in our community trying to make sure victims are heard when they come and report crime and take that incredibly difficult step. And I think the last group I'd really want to thank, and I think is a little abnormal for our community, is our court system and our judges. We have judges, I think, who have gone out of the way, especially in the last 10 years, to make sure that when folks come into their courtroom, they treat them with dignity and respect, that they make sure that victims have a chance to speak, to make sure that they have a chance to tell their truth to the court and they listen to them. So our office makes sure that they can do that, but I also really have to thank our court system and our judges for centering victims throughout the process as well and making sure their voices are heard. And so for all that, I would thank the folks in this room and all the people we work with on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you very much. We've got a signed proclamation for you if you'd like to take it with you. Missing one commissioner's signature, but Robin can help you get that later. Thank you all for being here and thank you for the work you do. All right, commissioners, with that, we'll move on to our consent agenda. Do any of you wish to take anything off for questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Anybody in the public wish to remove anything from the consent agenda? Any virtual hands, Sarah? Okay, we will close that and bring it back to the commission for a motion.
I move to approve consent agenda items 2.1 through 2.3.
Second.
Moved and double seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Great, passes unanimously. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to general public comment. Is there anybody here who wishes to provide general public comment about items that are not on today's agenda? Okay, seeing no takers in person. Any virtual hands yet, Sarah? All right, that will conclude our general public comment for this evening, and we will roll right into our regular agenda. And I will turn it over to Jill Jolicoeur to introduce the item.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jill Jolicoeur, Assistant County Administrator. Here is a follow-up to the March 25th meeting where the County Commission directed staff to develop a tenant eviction defense pilot program and process for soliciting the proposals from qualified nonprofit legal service providers. So in your packet, you have a draft document for your consideration of what that program pilot overview, as well as a request for proposals. That's kind of a combo document. What I can tell you that I didn't want to put it in the packet because it is not, it will be an informal RFP process because it's not going to be it's not subject to our the finance guidelines that it be a formal RFP. But we are going to, I've worked closely with Cindy Phillips with purchasing department to put it into the RFP format and make sure we have all the necessary fields that we like to have just for protection of the county, things like that. So what you have is, it is an RFP document, but it also kind of combines what the program outline looks like as well. But we'll have a more official document once we get the green light to go out. And while I'm on that topic, just because I've said I've been working with Cindy, our goal is to be able to, when we have the green light on the RFP format, to be sharing that information by invitation with the identified partners that we know of, but we want to hear from any folks that are listening, or any partners that we don't have awareness of that aren't already going to be receiving an invitation. And we have contacts with organizations. We will be doing it that way. Happy to talk about that more, but we're going to try to be as formal, but not officially formal as possible to be consistent with our practices. So as you can see here, we are tentatively hoping to commence these services being provided through a referral process by June 1. So we have a quick timeline. And the term of the pilot agreement will go from June 1 until December 31st for that initial pilot period. I will be submitting a placeholder request for supplemental assistance as part of the budget process for 2027. And just as a placeholder. So, because we won't know the outcomes, we do intend to provide regular updates to the county commission on the progress and what we're seeing. But I did want to just make sure that I am already intending to submit a supplemental request, just so we have a placeholder. So as we talked about, and when I outlined, we talked about at the last meeting, we're really going to lean into the existing practices that are already in place through our district court self-help center, where they're already doing outreach to households that have been notified to appear for the eviction docket. They're already doing outreach to them. So our hope is that that we continue to lean on the infrastructure that they've built, develop some enhanced online intake forms that are available to help capture in the most streamlined way possible some of the key demographic information, circumstances of eviction that are going to be what will determine whether or not legal advice is warranted, but also just to have data to capture those unique circumstances of what's going on that I know we've gotten feedback from commissioners. The RFP document includes a lot of obligations of the provider to document data. So happy to talk more about any of those points. It's proposed that I will oversee the pilot program in close collaboration with the District Court Self-Help Center Director, gave Chief Judge, Judge McCabria, who's now going to be over the eviction docket, gave him a heads up on this proposal on Friday, and he did not have any questions, and he's supportive of self-help, being a part of the project team. And then, of course, the selected provider. So we're going to work to collect information and evaluate the impact of the pilot, the experience of the participants, and to the greatest extent possible, tenants and landlords. So we're going to have to potentially use some creative solutions to engage property owners, landlords on what is their experience with when a tenant has been referred for these services. What does that interaction look like? Have some and figure out what's the best way to have a feedback loop with them. I want to say we won't do focus group sessions, but I'm open to that. So I think we're going to be trying to figure out what's the right balance to make sure that we learn as much as possible through the program. I did try to hint at in this document, and I said a little bit of this as well, but we are already collecting a lot of data from the Self-Help Center already has an intake form that our IT department is working on making some enhancements to. The district court already collects a lot of information on evictions that are available, and some of that's been provided as part of the course to having this conversation today. And then we also have a lot of data that we capture from the HSC. So that's just that we're with our wonderful staff from IT. We're working to make the necessary enhancements, but also to be able to harness all of those data sets to be able to tell a compelling story as a project oversight team. And in addition to the obligations that are requested of the provider, they're going to have their own data to provide and track, and that's their obligation to do that. How we supplement that with what resources, what we have access to, we have a lot of data that we can access. I think we just want to continue to think about what questions are we trying to answer with that data. And what I'm surmised so far is is this effective? Is this preventing evictions? Is having access to legal counsel truly what was missing for some folks? But we also want to know, is it a combination of legal assistance and maybe HSC funds if they meet that priority population? So I think with the data that we have that we're going to be able to answer some questions, but I'd love to keep having a conversation with the commission about what are those questions that you want to answer. And I feel like we can iterate the data as we go along and we keep you updated. I will say that I know that Commissioner Kelly had sent some questions, and I did try to reflect some of that in here and how we're going to collect that information. And then and specifically, who's appearing at the, and Commissioner Anderson had similar questions. How are we understanding the folks that are appearing at the answer docket to understand, what kind of impact can we have on more folks appearing at the answer docket? And I'll just share, we had a really encouraging conversation on Friday afternoon with Judge McCabery about when we think about the challenges that will happen with the construction over there. We already have challenges with, even though the Self-Help Center sends that proactive resource letter to the folks that when they've been evicted, we still know that folks are challenged in showing up to that eviction docket, even though it's in their best interest. They're challenged for all the reasons like all of us would be. We got childcare, we got work complications, we have disabilities. And so one of the things that we've been playing around with, and it really sounds like Judge McCabery is very seriously considering this, is what would it look like to experiment with a virtual eviction docket? Johnson County's been doing that. So we want to look at that as well. And just kind of test, does that have do we see more folks showing up? Is that an intervention we need to experiment with? Doing one of those, maybe there's one answer docket a month. Maybe we want folks to come in person because it's easier to connect with folks in person. But anyway, I just wanted to again talk about how we really hope to lean into the work that the Self-Help Center is already done. Casey Forsyth just shared with me today that they've hired that additional staff member, that they had a vacancy of a staff member and they just made that hire. And so they truly are going to, I think, be positioned to be responsive to the questions that commissioners are interested in answering with data and making sure that we are, if we're not collecting it today and we don't have it in that list of data obligation requests in the RFP document, then can we start collecting that information? And I did just want to respond to, we do have to be thoughtful about capacity of that staff. They are already proactively outreaching to folks that receive get that eviction notice. They're providing those resources. We'll obviously want to put a lot more information on there and like, hey, you may be eligible for legal representation. Like that's a new thing, and we're going to want to work with my trusty colleague, Carrie Britt, on marketing that this is available. But the Self-Help Center already has a really great collaborative partnership with, if it is not a good fit for legal representation, I think a lot will probably brief legal advice will be a common thing that a lot of folks may take advantage of, but that larger representation, the number of those folks that qualify for that, I'm not sure what that will look like, but a Self-Help Center has a great track record of knowing who are the partners that they can refer folks to. How to apply for the HSC. Maybe you need to contact the city rental inspection program, which again, like maybe that's probably a situation where legal representation could be a good fit. I digress. I just say that we have a lot of opportunity to partner with Self-Help, and our IT department is really interested in making sure that we have the right data platforms and intake forms to be able to be successful. I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Jill. Commissioners, questions top of mind?
Just a little bit. One of the things was to, track longer term outcomes in up to 6 months. And as part of the RFP, that's part of what's being asked for, but it's also only a 6-month program for the funding. So how does that work in terms of the obligations of folks who would answer the RFP?
That's a good question. I think we may just have to, as a backup plan, if we don't proceed with the program, if the funding isn't included, then figure out how are we capturing information from folks that have been a part of the program, and can we have a follow-up process with them? The HSC has had that a process of follow-up calls for a long time. A lot of the times they're not able to, not a lot of, I'd say 50% of the time, the providers are unable to get in contact with folks, but we have a process of doing that. So I think we would definitely figure that out as a backup plan one way or the other.
I'd also, I guess, add that, obviously if they re-entered the program or they had another eviction notice, that would be something we could know and track. But in many areas, it's hard for us to track outcomes beyond the course of the program.
Sure. And I know most of that outreach would be to the folks that were being served the eviction notice, but we had talked also from up here about wanting to make sure that the outreach to landlords continues, and that may be also another source of information about the longer term duration of a person in that particular housing situation.
I had, one comment and one question. Under scope of work, we say the pilot program is to provide access to free eviction legal defense. I'd prefer free be changed to taxpayer provided instead of free, because we are paying for it. My question is, under provider responsibilities, section A, E, and G all refer to recipient eligibility, participation requirements, and recipient eligibility. And so that would seem to indicate we are defining who's going to be accepted into the program. And I'm just wondering what that definition is.
That is to, I think when we say income and circumstances, it's to get a sense of a picture of what's happening in that household. Do they have income? Are they on a fixed income on retirement or disability? So I think I think I've mentioned this before. I've based a lot of this on the way that the city of Topeka has scoped their project, and they're going into, I believe, the second or third year of it. But I know that I've looked at two, the intake forms that are used for that. There's with the provider that's assigned to that provides those services, and that's Kansas Legal Services. There's a lot of information that's in there because I'm gonna let Bryn can correct me if I'm wrong. She's here with us today from Kansas Legal Services, but more often than not, there's other factors going on in the household as well that it's helpful to have, in addition to income and circumstances and the nature of that income, it's helpful to have as full of a snapshot as possible about what's going on in a household to best address the issue and potentially other issues.
Yeah, I guess my point is there a cutoff on income? Is there a cutoff on family size, a cutoff on age?
No, I think we want to have them look at that. And I think the hope is that the biggest determinant of whether or not they're a good fit for the program is largely the circumstances of the eviction is my interpretation.
Yeah, Jill and I talked about this. I really think we, as a staff, we want to know why the attorneys picked this case. Because they're limited resources, I want to know why they picked this case. So if that's what we mean by determine recipient eligibility based on submitted documentation.
The requirements aren't preset.
No.
It's going to be the legal people that decide
Yes.
which to take.
Yes.
Thank you.
Jill, I had a question about the, under the proposal format. And I understand that this, because we've read some of the Topeka documents previously and that a lot of this language is pulled from that. Can you talk to me a little bit about your thinking on D specifically, the 3 references for program administration? I sort of flagged that as, it seems a little bit like a high hurdle, perhaps given the limited amount of eviction defense legal work that exists in the state or surrounding communities. So can you talk to me a little bit about that thinking and what exactly you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it could be interpreted as, and I know I've been contacted to clarify some alternative ways, who could be those references? And the clarification that I offered was, if you're not able to get a reference letter from a grant agency that you've done similar work with, because that's not what the Office of Justice Administration is, that they can't do that. But are there community partners that agency has worked with, and they would have they have a strong reputation of making referrals, and could speak to their ability to provide these services. So I think it's inclusive of community partners or institutional partners that an organization has worked with.
Okay, thank you. That helps, and I appreciate the broader interpretation. It reads as though the intent is that it would be from sort of other more formal partners or programs that had either been a funder or maybe a partner provider. So I just wanted to check in about that. I think as long as we have a broad interpretation and there's other community agencies that can signal their support based on their experience with clients accessing these services, I think that, that's a powerful type of reference letter versus, how funding has necessarily been going. So thank you for that clarification. Other questions, commissioners? Okay. Well, with no other questions, thank you, Jill, for that overview and for your work on this. We'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. It is a regular agenda item. Is there anybody here in the audience who wishes to provide public comment on this item? Okay, seeing no takers. Any virtual? I'm so sorry, I didn't see you. Sorry about that. Go ahead and come forward, and it looks like the microphone is actually already unmuted for you, so you're ready to start talking. And I don't know if you were here at the beginning. Sorry, just be sure to state your name and zip code if you're comfortable sharing that.
Yep, Jesse Fisher. My zip code is 66006, but I do work in Lawrence as a property manager. And louder, closer. Thanks. I'm so short. Awesome. So I just had a few questions that I wrote down while I was listening. So how much data is going to be needed to turn this program from a pilot into an actual implemented program? How much data will you need for that?
So we don't actually respond to public comment. This is your opportunity. You have 3 minutes to be able to make public comment. And you may have missed the very beginning of our meeting where we talk about that a little bit. So we can reset your time and you're certainly able to ask all your questions. We might have follow-up questions about that or ask for questions. And if you leave your information with staff before you leave, we can follow up.
Perfect. Okay, I guess my biggest one would be then, does the new bill that passed, Senate Bill 391, does this affect the data, since now landlords do not have to accept any outside assistant payments from any outside agency, period? They can deny that. Does that do anything? Does it affect it at all? No? Got it. Great. I think that's it, I guess, because I had a few more, but I think I'll just follow up with those later.
Okay, thank you for your public comment. You're always welcome to reach out to us in writing. Is there anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Russ Livingston. I've been here before. We're on the eve of paying property taxes again, and so this is important to me to say this. I now have to pay my taxes in 2 installments, which I never used to have to do before. And so when we're talking about these programs here, it does come from our tax base. So I'd like to speak about the proposed $40,000 tenant right to counsel pilot program. I understand the intent is to provide legal support to tenants facing eviction, but I want to ask a broader question about fairness and balance. Why are tenants the only beneficiaries of publicly funded legal assistance in what is, at its core, a shared legal process? Evictions are not one-sided. Landlords are participants in that same system, often navigating complex regulations, delays, and legal costs of their own. Yet they are excluded entirely from this proposal. Beyond that, what about homeowners facing foreclosure or property owners dealing with judicial tax sales? These situations can be just as destabilizing, yet they're not included either. If public funds are going to be used to influence outcomes in housing disputes, then we should be honest about what's happening. We are choosing one side of a multi-party system to receive support, and while others, equally affected, receive none. To borrow from George Orwell's Animal Farm, some are more equal than others. Lawrence's history underscores the importance of balance. As noted in the April 21st, 2026 Lawrence Journal World, reflecting an 1856 account, rental property investment has long been central to this community, built on agreements between willing parties without the layers of intervention we see today. That history reminds us that the housing has always involved both tenants and property owners. If the county steps into that relationship with public funding, it should do so in a way that respects all participants in the legal process, tenants, landlords, and homeowners alike. Anything less risks undermining the very fairness we're trying to promote. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anybody else here who would like to provide public comment on this item? All right, thank you both. Anybody online, Sarah?
Yep, I'm going to move Vince Munoz. I'm going to unmute you. You're in the panel and you have 3 minutes to provide your public comment.
Okay. Oh, hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I just wanted to address that kind of last point about fairness. Landlords do actually receive a number of sort of instances of financial support from both the county and from other sort of sources of government. That's just like worth considering. For one example is that the county housing authority actually has a fund that provides for like damages in instances where a voucher recipient causes damage to a landlord. They can get some of that reimbursed. There's also the fact that in the eviction process specifically, the county funds a sheriff's deputy who, actually enforces the eviction. So there is actually already some precedent for county support for one party and not the other, but it's just the landlord, not the tenant. And of course, landlords often get tax write-offs because this is really a business for them. And one final thing I would just say is that tenants are the ones who pay their landlord's property taxes. Like we pay the property taxes. Other than that, I would just encourage you to support this. This is obviously a first step and not the end all be all of this conversation, but it is a good first step, and I appreciate all the staff's work and commissioners' support for this. So thank you.
Thank you, Vince. Anybody else, Sarah? Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment on this item and bring it back to the commission for any other questions that may have brought up to ask staff, comments, or motion.
I want to follow up on a couple of questions that came from public comment, and I know we got a head shake, but I want to just ask, and we'll just put some words to it. The Senate Bill 391, any impact here at all?
No, I mean, this is not related to sources of income. It is funding for eviction defense.
And it's possible that whoever answers the RFP, whatever organization may, I can't imagine that they probably would be weighing sources of income and who they choose to represent or not. So,
well, I think that's data we'd like to collect. Okay. So if, as they try to figure out why they're picking that case, it'd be good to know.
Okay. And the other was a question of data related to, like, this is a pilot program for the limited funding source for some eviction defense, and then I think it's this body that would weigh it at budget time whether or not there's a program that follows that. That's actually really soon because we won't have the data back. So it's a that's a tricky thing for me because, for me, a pilot is just, a one-time thing. And part of what we're doing is trying to get a better understanding of the system as a whole. So I just think it's going to be a really tough conversation for me anyway at budget time over the summer before we will have any information back. But I don't know if other
And I
commissioners
think
want
there's,
to.
I think there's lots of options in that place. Commissioners could decide to set some funds aside if they wanted to continue the pilot in 2027. You won't know in July when you're making those decisions at budget, but you could set funds aside in contingency, and then you could decide in December if you want to continue the pilot in 2027. If not, you don't have to. I think what staff is going to propose is additional one-time funding for 2027. So, and then in essence, if you don't feel like you have enough data, it would in essence be closer to a one-year pilot or an 18-month pilot where you're making decisions summer of 27 on if you wanted to have it move forward with ongoing funding.
And it matters to me, as we had the conversation up here, that we're engaging landlords in the process also for what felt useful, what felt considerably not useful, like how did the process go, and were they impacted at all? Because as cases get chosen, because it'll be a small number of cases that would get full representation for that, are those even impacting our local landlords, or do they tend to be chosen from our out-of-town landlords? I think those are some pieces that some things that we want to track and know about.
We're talking about this because of a line item in the A Place for Everyone, which is a joint agreement between the city and the county. If you look at the statistics, most of the evictions come from the city of Lawrence. There's quite a few less in the rural areas, Eudora and Baldwin. I think with what's it been, 2 or 3 years of A Place for Everyone, we need to go back and visit the whole thing. We know a lot more now than we did when that was put together. So I think we need to look at the whole thing again. I personally believe this is a city issue, not a county issue.
Give a little context on where I think some of the conversation came from. It was at budget last summer, we had a request from the district court to fund a portion of a eviction diversion coordinator that they had grant funded, and that was already happening in our community, and their budget we felt like their budget could cover that, and I think it did. But we had set this money aside for that conversation to see if that was where that was needed, or if there was something else that might be a better use for that money. But the county does work in housing and in eviction diversion in other ways, and through self-help it would be part of that, and that's available to both landlords and tenants equally as a resource.
Also, Holistic Defenders has a grant, and they do provide services to some people being evicted, and essentially they're following this pilot program already, I believe. They may have the data we're looking for on a limited basis.
Well, you're right, Commissioner Dorsey, and I think, KHD has been a great partner in being able to provide a lot more data and context and sustenance to this conversation that's been evolving in these chambers, I think. And we also know that grant is coming to an end. Whether or not they will get renewed funding remains to be seen, but we learned that was it was not enough funding to meet the need. And we've learned that this pilot funding and potential future funding is a good opportunity to enhance that and subsidize that, and then be able to set the parameters and guardrails of what types of information we want to be collecting that might be a little bit more granular and in detail than what I suspect OJA might be collecting per se, or than that we've been presented with so far. But, and I also think it's important to continue to reiterate that all City of Lawrence residents, all renters in this county, whether they live inside a municipality or the unincorporated area, are a resident of Douglas County. And if they are paying rent to a property owner in Douglas County, then they are effectively paying property taxes in our community. We have heard that testimony repeatedly from landlords that it's a factor. And so I think, what we're talking about here is a pretty narrow and specific tool to add to the toolbox that, as I've said before, for me acts as a backstop and helps us get a little bit clearer picture of how all these other more upstream tools and strategies and things that have been evolving and developing in the past 3 years of a place for everyone, and the progress that we've made on that, what we've learned so far. I don't disagree with you, Commissioner Dorsey, that there's always opportunity to revisit parts of or possibly the whole plan to, evaluate where we think we are with some things and what may or may not need some adjusting. This to me, though, is a very evidence-based practice with a lot of good, strong examples and data from around the country, including communities that look like ours that support this. And I'm hopeful to see that by further enhancing the work that KHD has started with that OJA grant, and that Kansas Legal Services has also been able to, do more of, both in our community and in surrounding communities, that we can start to see some better information about gaps where we can address. But, I think that this is a small starting spot. I am hopeful to see good information that makes this commission feel more confident about why this tool is a necessary investment and how it can help smooth out some of the ripples from earlier in the process and earlier in the system. And it will help us identify some of those things better, and how to plug in more preventative tools. I think that we are always looking towards that, and we're still not, it's perhaps too big an aspiration, but an aspiration nonetheless, to try and prevent as much harm and homelessness and insecure housing as possible. And I think that this helps us understand better about where we might be missing the mark, or where we just cannot meet the need, and why that is. And I'm hopeful to understand that better. Commissioners, I'm curious if there are some other questions or data points in particular that would be important for Jill to know and hear from us that you may have flagged as not seen represented in the RFP that we have in front of us.
Not for me. I appreciate staff responding to the lots of questions I had. I think I asked for like 30 surveys. So thanks for putting up with me. This sort of frames it. I recognize it's going to be really difficult sometimes to collect some of the data that we're looking for, but I think it's at least worth an attempt. And since you asked a question, I want to make sure other commissioners have a chance before I say anything else.
I'm comfortable with the scope and the cost of this program as a learning tool. So, and I had my questions answered, and I feel comfortable with what's presented.
Questions, Commissioner Dorsey?
No questions.
I do hope, I appreciate, I want to respond to Jesse's question about how much data, and maybe you have watched our budget hearings before. If you haven't, please join the fun, because I think there are so many things that I wonder, like, what's the right amount of data to make a decision on? And I think that's what's really hard as a county commissioner is, when do you hit that threshold where you feel enough comfort? And sometimes you can't get the data. And sometimes our partners struggle to give us the data, So I wish there was an easy answer for that, because it would make our job a whole lot easier if there was just like a certain threshold of data that we could get. But I hope what I hear is that, in some ways, maybe our property owners, our landlords can help us gather that data. Because I think that's the one thing, as I visited with staff about how do we get that, How do we track that down? What do we see the impacts on both sides? We heard public comment about, this will have a large impact on property owners and landlords. I think over the number of months we've had this conversation, I've heard so many assumptions happen in this place. And so how do we sort of test those assumptions to determine what we may know a little bit more about? And to me, this seems modest. It seems reasonable as an experiment. It will get us some data that will tell us something new. It may just create more questions. I'm not really sure, but I appreciate those who recognize that this is an experiment, and we're going to try something, and we're going to see what we can find out, and to understand that this level of investment is worth that to do that experiment.
I think one of the assumptions that we heard levied from some of our public comment previously towards landlords was, if you can't make the business work out, then get out of the business, and not valuing our local landlords, which we as a body have also supported entrepreneurs and expanding businesses in Douglas County like that. That hurts my soul, and I think others too. And then on the flip side of that, one of the things that we've heard from local landlords is that we have, more predatory folks that come in from out of the community and treat our people very differently than how our local landlords would treat folks. Those are some pieces that I think need to be teased out. What's the value of having local property owners here? One of the things that I've seen in my own life, but also anecdotally and from some of the other property owners is like how much they are willing to subsidize someone for a period of time until they can't anymore, and then that's when the eviction occurs. Finding out how many local dollars from private people are also subsidizing folks to keep them housed is an important piece of the equation, because it's something that we're not talking about because we can't quantify it. It all happens on a private basis. But this is an opportunity to ask some of those questions also is, how did you get in this spot? Were there other resources that were used to help, prevent up until this point? Some of those might be, our public funds are the Housing Resource Stabilization Collaborative, and some of it might be that there were private landlords that were assisting, or churches, or some of these other pieces. So understanding the system better, I think, is the purpose of this pilot, and then we'll know more how to move forward after that. But when we first started talking about that we might have this conversation, I was really hopeful that it would be a healthier conversation within the public than what it has been. And that's really been too bad, because I think that there's a lot of shared values across a lot of what we heard as being siloed conversations. I think there's a lot of shared value, and shared value is keeping our people housed and stable and thriving and contributing in society. And turns out that renters only help pay the property taxes when they're actually renting and paying rent. So there's just pieces here where everybody kind of aligns, and that's where we need to be digging in and finding out, like, what are the right levers that limited taxpayer dollars can help in that system, because we can't solve all of it with money.
Any further comments, commissioners? Okay. With that, I move to approve the proposed tenant eviction defense pilot program and process, and authorize the county administrator to solicit proposals from qualified nonprofit legal service providers to recommend to the Board of County Commissioners for approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All right, passes 3-1 with one commissioner absent. All right, thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Jill, for your work on this. We look forward to the next conversation. That brings us to the end of our regular agenda. We'll move on to appointments. Then I don't believe we have any immediately queued up from. So I'm seeing some head nods agreeing with me on that. So I'll just move us right along to Commissioner and/or Administrator Miscellaneous and start with Sarah's memo.
Thank you, commissioners. My updated memo is in the packet, but before we start on that, I guess I would be remiss if I didn't talk about how the county hosted such a wonderful event last night for the community with our County Government Discovery Day in honor of National County Government Month. Carrie Britt's tireless work on this event that has just grown and grown year after year is really tremendous. We are doing a little internal argument over how many people were there, but we think it was probably around 300. So it's just really tremendous to see a positive interaction of young families and people in the community with the services that we provide. So really, it was a great night, and appreciate commissioners that were able to attend, and thank you for your ongoing support of this work. I also wanted to talk to commissioners. We've had some about next week's meeting. I had an item moved to a further date. So I really only had one item planned for next week. Commissioner Anderson will still be gone next week. Commissioners Reed and Dorsey and I will be coming back in from DC. So I would propose that we do cancel next week's meeting so that we can, just because I am nervous that if we have flight delays with already having commissioner gone, that we won't have a quorum. And since it wasn't a very large agenda anyway, there's no problems in moving that item to May 6th.
Any objections, commissioners? Great. Seeing
Right.
none, sounds like a plan.
Okay. I don't really have a whole lot of comments about my memo. There's lots of great dates. So if you have questions, please let us know. I did want to follow up a little bit. Commissioner Dorsey talked about a revisiting of A Place for Everyone. Is that something the commission would like us to work on a work session? It would also just be a good refresher. It's been a while since we've had some of those conversations. So I just want to make sure I know what the commission's direction is.
And Sarah, one thing I didn't think about when you and I were talking about this as well, is the right to counsel component is still a part of the affordable housing plank. One thing we know is coming and was the focus of our Place for Everyone partner meeting this past week was, and I'm happy to share with you all this presentation. City of Lawrence is getting into the final days of refining their the recommendations for their affordable housing study that they've been doing. And the intent has been for the findings of that study and the recommendations that they're soliciting from community partners. That's what we did last week. We're going to do another session with our steering committee members to make sure that we have all the right perspectives. But the goal of the City of Lawrence, at least what as communicated by Leah Roslin, Affordable Housing Administrator, is that study really serves as the foundation for what next steps the next iteration of A Place for Everyone. And that doesn't mean we have to wait till the end of the current 5-year term. I've said this before, it's a living document. So that's one thing that's coming. And there'll be more conversations with the City Commission, I'm sure, about what that study looks like, if you all want to follow that.
Do they have a timeline on when that will be done and presented?
I think early next month, I think is what
Okay,
Leah said,
so
but
pretty
I'll have that
quickly.
information tomorrow.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we had a recent, it was a work session, I think, not a regular agenda item, conversation where we dug into the supportive housing plank. And so I always get to follow up on Commissioner Dorsey's question, going to ask if there were some planned or thoughts about how to come back with more of those planks. So it sounds like affordable housing is queued up and there's going to be a report to digest after the City Commission receives it. So that seems like a good next step. And then the other planks, I think we've really only had a focused conversation about the supportive housing planks so far this year. Does that track
Yeah,
right?
But we
for
do
the-
have some scheduled for the rest of this year on our flex housing pool, and the
Supportive housing for women.
supportive housing for women are also planned to come to you yet this spring. Okay. Do
I
you
can- can-
should we try, do you want to wait till after those and see if there's Commissioner Dorsey, and then see if there's like the other planks of it that could bring in other experts on, or should we do that part first?
I'm willing to wait.
Okay.
I also would offer that I can't remember how long ago it was, we had a joint city-county meeting that looked at A Place for Everyone. And while we may say, you get this, and I think it would be good to have a discussion. And there's some other items I think that are out there that have been debated back and forth, that it would be, we have a lot of new city commissioners, a lot of new county commissioners, that maybe it's time for a joint city county meeting to look at A Place for, especially if we want to do a rewrite, because it was something that we did together. I think it would be good to see what their values are, what ours are on that, before we head down to rewrite it ourselves.
Is that a discussion that would be most healthily had once they have a new city manager up and running?
I hadn't thought about that, so I don't want to say no to it, but my first reaction would be like, I don't know that we're starting something new. I just think it would be good to have a discussion, about where our support is for it. I think many of you watched with the Affordable Housing Board's recommendation on the Rockledge project and what happened with that at the City Commission. And we have some stake in that as well. So how are we talking back and how are we communicating with our colleagues about, our priorities around that? And that ties in very closely to that Place for Everyone plan, as we do that. So the
Well-
answer to your question, I don't think so.
Well, I wasn't here when A Place for Everyone was formulated, and I said that I think this tenant's right to counsel rightly should fall under Lawrence. Maybe there was an agreement I don't know about that that's a county issue, not a city issue. But I think it would be nice to go through and review some of the points with the city.
Yeah, I think it would be good too. Commissioner Dorsey, I think there are always going to be things that when you come on the commission that you pick up that are, have been previously made decisions. I didn't decide to put a fire station in Eudora, right? But that's something that a previous commission did. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that we bring that forward each time. I think it's really good to revisit the plan and but I want to make sure we do that with our partners, not without them.
I can see what their temperature is on having a joint meeting. I do know that they're also embarking on their new strategic planning process. So that may also inform some changes to their priorities. So I'll reach out and see what they think about it. They may want to wait. And if that's the case, we'll continue to talk about the planks and we can continue to dive into the places that we need to. So I'll keep you posted.
Any miscellaneous items, commissioners?
I did want to update the commission. We had a EDC meeting, and as our rep, I want to keep us sort of looped in with that, and then had another meeting today. I do think there is a lot of questions that are happening about the role of the EDC and the chamber. Today, I know there was a meeting between the executive group of the chamber and the executive group of the EDC. So I think there are things that are in play here and some big discussions that are happening. Nothing is set in stone, but I think it will impact our budget discussion in July about how those two entities work together. Sarah and Sean were both at the meeting today and can fill you in, but I do think it's important to keep in contact with our economic development partners as we think about how we serve all of Douglas County and what our role is in that, and how our role may be different than the city of Eudora, the city of Baldwin, the city of Lawrence, and Lecompton, how they all impact that as well. I want to thank all the people who serve on the EDC board because we're having really healthy discussions right now. But how they decide to go forward is really their decision. We can decide how we fund them, but how that is structured is the decision of that board and the chamber's board going forward. So I just want to give a little bit of an update. I feel like I gave you more questions than probably answers on that, but just letting you know that work continues to happen.
One of the items on our of events that are coming up is that I was going to miss was the DECA ribbon cutting. And so I had reached out and I got my preview. So I got a little tour there and was really pleased and proud of the work that's going to be happening there. I'm really excited for that addition in our community and for the role that we played to help get there, and raise some other questions too. But I just wanted to let folks know that I won't be there for that day. Hope others can, but I did go and seek out the work.
Anything else, commissioners? All right, we are adjourned in 1 hour. Have a good night, everybody.